And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Small craft advisories for Lynn Canal tomorrow. North winds 25 knots, 15 knots for Stevens Passage, and light northeast wind at 10 for Clarence Strait. North to northeast winds here for the south coast at 15 knots. Central coast east at 15, and even lighter on the north coast out of the east and northeast at just 10 knots. And for the day on Thursday, southeast winds 15 knots here for the south coast, east at 25 on the central coast, and the north coast, east winds 15 to 20. And for Lynn Canal, north at 20 knots, north 15 Stevens Passage, Clarence Strait, east winds 20 knots. Prince William Sound, east winds at 10 knots, east 2 southeasterlies at 15 for the eastern North Gulf Coast, light variable winds here for the west side, and northwest winds 25 to 30 knots. Barren Islands, Kamishak Bay, north at 15 for Prince William Sound. And for Thursday, let me back that up. North to northeast wind, or north winds at 15 knots for Cook Inlet. And for Prince William Sound on Thursday, east winds at 10 knots, north to northeast, Cook Inlet 15 to 20 knots. And for the Barren Islands, western North Gulf Coast, and Kamishak Bay, winds will be out of the east at 20 knots, and about the same for the eastern North Gulf Coast, but we'll call it 15 knots there. Kodiak Island, northwest winds 25 knots for Wednesday, northwest at 10 for Bristol Bay, east winds 20 knots for the Alaska Peninsula. And for the Thursday outlook, we've got northeast winds 20 to 25 knots for the peninsula, northeast 20 for Bristol Bay and Kodiak Island, east to northeast winds 20 knots. Central and eastern Aleutians tomorrow, mostly east winds at about 30 knots, northeast winds 30 knots for the western Aleutians. And for the day on Thursday, northwest winds here 25 to 30 knots from Atka west to Shimia. And for the Fox Islands, winds will be mostly out of the north at about 30 knots. And for the southwest coast, north winds tomorrow 10 to 15 knots, northeast at 15, Norton Sound, St. Lawrence Island, northeast 25 there for St. Matthew Island, east at 20 for the Pribilofs. And then for St. Paul, St. George, northeast winds 30 knots, north at 30 knots, also for St. Matthew Island, St. Lawrence Island, Norton Sound, Yukon Delta Coast, north at 20 and north 25 for the Kuskokwim Delta. And for the Chukchi Sea tomorrow, north to northeast winds 20 to 30 knots, northeast at 20 for the western Arctic coast. Central coast here north at about 20, light variable winds on the east side. And then for the eastern Wilford Sea coast on Thursday, east-northeast winds at about 20 knots. Brisk wind advisory, central and western coast here for 25-knot winds out of the northeast. And then we've got 15 to 35 knot winds for the Chukchi Sea out of the north and northeast.